Hello and welcome back to J.P.'s World of Wrestling. Okay, so we continue on with our top fives. I just did my top five WWF tag teams of all time that I liked. And now, as kind of a unique top five list, this is a specific top five list. This is a top five list of my favorite wrestlers, or my top five wrestlers that never won the world title. Some of them won the Intercontinental title, but they never won the big title, the big belt. So these are kind of some of my favorites, and I'm going to go over them with you right now. That's how this works, I talk, you listen, and, Anyway, so number five, I'm going with Rick the Model Martel. Yes, I know he was a heel, but you have to admit he was a pretty entertaining heel. And he was a solid worker, and that's just a lot of his mannerisms, I always enjoyed. Even though he's a heel, and yes, I booed, but really, I kind of always dug what he was doing. And, I mean, the way he would come down to the ring wearing his either pink or purple trunks, and with his sunglasses, he would kind of do this, and like, hey, look at me. He would wear those tennis sweaters, and with the tennis racket, or the arrogance. And everybody remembers the angle that they did where Rick Martel sprayed arrogance in the eyes of Jake the Snake Roberts. And it started this big long feud, what culminated into a match at WrestleMania 7. And Rick Martel was always a solid worker. He was always entertaining. And that's why he's my number 5 pick. Now, number 4, I'm going to go with another heel. But he's Ravishing Rick Rude. That's right. The ladies' man himself, Ravishing Rick. Now, again, Rick Martel was a heel. Or, I just talked about it. This is Rick Rude. Rick Rude was a heel. And he did compete for the WWF title against the Ultimate Warrior at SummerSlam. But he never won the big belt in WWF. He did in WCW, but not WWF. So, but I mean, he was just kind of fun. He had the robes, and he would come down to the ring and tell everybody, what I'd like to have right now is for all you fat, out of shape, so-and-so sweat hogs to keep the noise down while I take my robe off and show you what a real sexy man is supposed to look like. Then he would do it, and some of the women would take pictures, and he would do this thing with his hips and his waist and everything, and I enjoyed it. I have to admit, even as a kid, even though he was a heel, I kind of enjoyed watching him. Ravishing Rick Rude. So number 3 is a guy who is a former Intercontinental Champion. Actually, Rick Rude is also a former Intercontinental Champion, but this guy, I always loved. Even though he didn't really have a gimmick, it's Greg the Hammer Valentine. That's right, I always enjoyed watching Greg Valentine wrestle, just because I always enjoyed his wrestling style. I always loved the fact that he didn't really need a gimmick. His gimmick was that he had no gimmick. He was just a wrestler. And he was in the World Wrestling Federation, and that's kind of what he was. And it's kind of weird because he fit in a company where there were a lot of gimmicks around. There was an awful lot of wrestlers that had specific gimmicks, but he didn't have a gimmick. He was just Greg the Hammer Valentine. WWF tried to give him a gimmick with Rhythm and Blues when they tagged him up with Honky Tonk Man. I didn't like it. He didn't like it. I thought it was terrible, but it didn't last long, and sooner or later he went back to just being Greg the Hammer Valentine. When he went to WCW, he was always known just as Greg Valentine, and he was always solid worker in the ring. He was always great. Always loved watching him. No matter whether it was WWF, WCW, or independent, it didn't matter. Greg Valentine. Thumbs up. So number 2, another former Intercontinental Champion. And in my book, my favorite Intercontinental Champion of all time, I'm talking about Mr. Perfect. That's right, Kurt Hennig, Mr. Perfect. He was almost flawless in the ring, and nobody sold better than Mr. Perfect. I mean, when somebody would smash his head against the turnbuckles, he would kind of springboard off this bottom rope to make it look like it was just really devastating. Somebody would clothesline him, he would kind of do the spin move and land on his back, and he would sell the heck out of those moves for his opponent. He would make his opponents look great. Actually, right now I'm in the middle of watching SummerSlam 91, where I'm in the middle of the Mr. Perfect Bret Hart match. And it's a pretty good match, I must say. It's a really good match. And it's one of my favorite SummerSlam matches of all time. And because it was really, really, really good. And that's just, the way I was feeling. I paused a SummerSlam DVD just so I can come here and do these videos for you. But yeah, Mr. Perfect is my number 2 pick for wrestlers to have never won the big belt. And number 1 is a guy I picked mostly because his promos were top notch, and I don't think anybody ever did a better promo than him. And of course, I'm talking about Jake the Snake Roberts. Now, in my mind, nobody really got into the head of his opponents better than Jake. Because if you watch some of his promos, a lot of wrestlers, they would scream in the camera like next Saturday night, I'm going to destroy you, I'm going to beat you, I'm going to end your career, I'm tough. But Jake the Snake Roberts, he didn't do that. I think mostly because he couldn't scream, but no, man, Jake, Jake would just kind of raise an eyebrow, he would just kind of look into the camera, and he would just kind of get into the psyche of his opponents and tell them exactly what he was going to do. And it was slow and methodical, and he played mind games. So, and then when he got into the ring, when you looked at his work in the ring, oh my goodness, his moves were unique. Nobody did moves like he did. He invented the DDT, and man, I was always kind of in awe watching him sometimes, just because of some of the movements he would do. He was actually kind of snake-like with some of his moves. Where he would set him up with that short arm clothesline. And his finishing move was the DDT, but honestly, when he was wrestling other top name guys, he really didn't get the DDT in very much. He really didn't. I mean, he got it in with enhancement talent, but he really, really had to wear down his opponents to get the DDT. A lot of times if he won, he would win by disqualification or a schoolboy pin or something like that. But once he did get the DDT on, it was over. That was it. Nobody got up from the DDT. So because of that, Jake the Snake Roberts is on my number 1 list for my top 5 wrestlers to have never won the big title in the World Wrestling Federation. So that is going to do it for this video. Now, if you are new here, you know where I'm going with this, don't you? You know where I'm going. Go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.